The Professor's Digital Dojo.
Hey guys, welcome back to the dojo. We are going to do a demo today, our tutorial, about setting up render layers for multiple camera angles and multiple camera passes. A little good news and some bad news. The bad news is the legacy render layer setup doesn't quite work anymore for this technique, so we will have to use the newfangled Maya render setup. Not a big deal, but we do have to go in and change something in our preferences. If you have gone into your preferences and under rendering, switched to the legacy render layers, as I asked many people to do, you will need to go back and switch it to render setup, hit save, and reopen Maya, at which point the render setup will be available to you. All right, and we'll look at that here in a second. But first, let's create a couple of cameras. So this is our perspective camera. This is our kind of default camera. And I generally don't want to use this camera for rendering. I call it the Uber camera. This is the camera we're going to use just to look at our scene and to navigate and construct. I created a very, very, very simple scene here. To create a camera, I'm going to show you guys the best way to do it is actually to go to Create, Cameras, and we're going to create a camera and aim, and that creates, if you look over here, a group, and inside of that group is the camera and the aim point. And what's great about that is I can set the camera anywhere that I want, like so, and I can set the aim point directly on an object, so it helps me to really construct my shots more easily. Let's go up to panel and look through this new camera one, and you can see here that no matter what I do, my camera will always be pointed at my object. Let's turn on our resolution gate as usual. So back in our perspective view, I can see this camera out here. It makes it much easier to work, by the way. I like it because I can kind of position the camera, and then when I keyframe it, I can make sure that it's staying pointed at whatever it is that I want to point it at. All right, so made one camera. I'm going to collapse this group just like that. Let's make a second camera. We're going to create camera and aim, like so. And we'll move this one. Maybe this camera will be here. Let's put the aim point again on our sphere. And let's move this camera maybe up, and it's looking directly down upon. And again, if I go to panels and look through my camera 2, I'll turn on my resolution gate. I can see that this is what that camera sees. Fair enough? All right. And we'll make a third camera here just so that we've got multiple cameras. Create, camera, and aim. And again, I'll put my aim point somewhere around here, maybe right there. And this camera we're just going to track and dolly that one in, say from right here. All right, so I've got my cameras set up, and now I'd like to animate my cameras. I'm going to open up the groups like so that I can just access the camera. And I'm just going to click on that camera 1 right here, like so. And it selects that camera. I'm going to animate this camera to go from frame 30. I'll hit S to set a key, to frame maybe 60. Remember, I'm doing this quick. Yours will be much different, of course. I'll go and grab this camera 2, and I'll set this one to animate, say from frame 1, hit S to set a key, and then between frame 1 and frame 40, I'm going to look through that camera just to make sure I'm kind of getting what I want here. I want it to kind of move in on my object like that. There you go. And then we'll go to camera 3, and we can look through camera 3, and I can either animate it here, or I can look through my perspective view, and I'll have camera 3 just kind of do a side-to-side track. All right, and we'll go from frame 40 to maybe, so I'll hit S to set a key, to maybe frame 70, like so. So that camera is just going to move thusly. All right, so we've got all 3 of our cameras set, and now let's put them into their render layer formation, and we'll show that here in a second. All right, so to get that open, we're going to come up here, and it's this icon right here. If we click on that, we're going to open up. Let me clear this out because I've got a bunch of stuff already in there. So I pulled that off camera so no one would get confused. And this is what the render setup looks like when it's clean. And so really simple, okay? We're just gonna go one at a time. So the first thing we need to do is create a layer for camera 1, and we'll just call this cam 1. We're gonna create a layer for camera 2, cam 2, or whatever you want to name them, and then we'll create a layer, click this icon for camera 3, cam 3. Now, what we need to do is we need to right click on each layer and create a collection. So I'll create a collection for camera 1, and you can call it whatever you want. I leave it as collection 1 for now. We'll create a collection for camera 2, and right click and create a collection for camera 3. Now all three have collections. Now what we need to do is populate each collection with the stuff that we want in our scene. So right now I have that platonic solid, I want that in my scene. I want my area light, I want my plane, and I want this camera 1 group. Now there's two ways to get it over here. I can either middle mouse drag them over into this box and it populates that collection, or we'll do it a separate way for this one. I'm going to go to this collection right here. I want all the same stuff, except this time instead of camera 1 I'm going to deselect that, and this time I'm going to select camera 2 group. And I'll just, instead of middle mouse dragging them over, I can just say add. All does the same thing. And then we'll come to collection 3 and we'll do the same thing. I'm just going to hold down my control key to deselect group 2, and now I'm selecting camera group 3, and I'm a middle mouse dragger most of the time, so I'm just going to middle mouse drag that over. And so now our cameras are set up. So our render layers are set up, and this render layer has camera 1, all of our geometry and lighting. This render layer has camera 2, all of our geometry and lighting. And this render layer has camera 3, all of our geometry and lighting. Pretty straightforward so far, right? And the rest is, I think, gravy. Easy to do. We can close this for a moment, and now let's open up our render settings window. Now, what I'm going to want to do here is, you'll notice we have multiple layers here in our render layers. So for render cam 1, okay, I'm going to go and set the frame range. But now, a few other things we need to set before we do that. So to make sure we can render a sequence, this is what will come up as the default. I want you to change this from single frame to name.number.extension, like so. Next, I want to make certain that we're set up to full HD 1080. So we'll be rendering everything out at 1920 by 1080. And then here on cam 1, I'm going to select a renderable camera from this drop-down list. I want that to be camera 1, just like that. And then I'll set my frames for camera 1, and that's easy to do. I can go select camera 1 here, and I can see that I'm going from frame 30 to 60. So I'll put in my start frame as frame 30, and my end frame is frame 60. Enter. And now this part is really important. I need to right click on start frame and create absolute override for visible layer. Then I need to right click on end frame and create absolute override for visible layer here. And then I need to right click on this renderable camera 1 right here and create absolute override for visible layer. I'm going to continue to do this for each layer again. So I'll go check camera 2 here, and I can see that I'm going from frame 1 to 40. So frame 1 to 40. And same thing again. I'll right click, create absolute override for visible layer, and then I'm going to switch the camera 1 to camera 2 and right click, create absolute override for visible layer. And now we'll do the same thing for camera 3. Camera 3, I'm going to select it, and I can see that my frame range is frame 40 through 70, 40, and 70. And same thing again. Create. Create. Now there's a lot more here in the drop down. Camera 3, right click, create absolute override for visible layer. Now there's a lot more we can do with the render layer setup, this bit right here. However, I'm just showing you guys the basics of how it gets used. And you can see that we've put in absolute overrides for start and end frames for these cameras. Now the other thing I'm going to do is let's just, well, I can trash the perspective camera. It shouldn't render the perspective camera. But I'm going to show you this in the render layers. So if we pull this up, for our scene right here, I want to uncheck this box. And that makes the master layer unrenderable. So it'll only be rendering cameras 1, 2, and 3 instead of cameras 1, 2, 3, and the perspective camera. So that's a really important thing to remember so you're not wasting your time. Now, I'll also go over and make sure my render settings are good. I'm setting these pretty low just so that we can blow through this pretty quickly. Your render settings will of course be higher for a cleaner, more sophisticated render. But now we'll come over to our rendering module if you're not already in it. And under the, whoops, wrong one, our rendering module, there we go. And here under render menu, we're going to open the render sequence options. I want you to make certain that both of these boxes are checked. All render enabled layers and all render enabled cameras. And then I'm going to bring it to a folder. We want to use good file hygiene here. I have a special drive that I use for putting my renders on. And I've already created a folder called Camera Tutorial. Select that folder. Now I'm going to hit render sequence. I'll pause this and I'll come back and show you what we've got. Alright, that render is done, and I'm going to pull up our file browser just to show you what you'd be looking at. And so let's go to my Odin drive, and here under renders, camera tutorial, you'll now see we've got a folder with camera 1, folder with camera 2, and a folder with camera 3. And of course, it's only rendering the frame range that I've asked it to. So hopefully that's helpful for you guys. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, feel free to put them in the comments or send me an email if you're not sure if I can help to create more clarity. Otherwise, remember to like and subscribe. Work hard. I hope you guys enjoy the tube. Bye.